Thank you so much. I already like this table right here. This is a good energy. My name is Peru Trivedi, and I'm here representing the Meridian International Center, along with my colleague Brandon Solosky, who you'll be hearing from momentarily. This is my fourth GEC, and I love this organization. I'm just really delighted to be welcomed back and to be invited back to talk a little bit about corporate diplomacy, the sort of emerging field of work of how the private sector and governments work together in constructive ways. And I thought before we get started, perhaps just a little bit of context. So today we'll be doing a little bit of a workshop. It's going to be interactive. It'll give you a good chance to meet the folks who are at your table settings. I assume some of you don't know each other who are seated next to one another. So this will be a fun way to get to know a couple of folks seated next to you. We want to make it fun. We want to make it light. We're not trying to give any gospel here, just trying to present a few facts and a couple of things that Brandon and I have found over the years. So very quickly, as context for who Meridian is. So Meridian's been a proud partner with the Global Entrepreneurship Network for, over 10 years. Meridian is a 501c3 nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. We're 65 years old, 150 employees, set on a 3.5-acre campus right in the heart of D.C., just a mile north of the White House on 16th Street, if you've been there. Two old historic mansions. And as a nonprofit, we typically have about a $50 million turnover each year. 65% of that $50 million comes directly from the federal government. Touchwood still comes from the federal government. And we were founded by and are continue to be funded by the U.S. Department of State. And what we do for the State Department is we do a couple of different things. But the primary thing is we implement the flagship public diplomacy programs for the U.S. government. And what that means is you think about the early Cold War era, the 1950s. The U.S. government was putting out a couple of programs that were sort of designed to bring these rising nations, rising leaders into our sphere of influence. Some of them are familiar. You may have heard of the Fulbright program that is adjacent to ours, the Marshall Plan, the Mansfield program. Mansfield is kind of like the Marshall Plan for Japan. So our program is the International Visitor Leadership Program. That's a program that brings rising leaders from all over the world to the United States on short 2 to 3 week exchange programs. These are folks who have been nominated by U.S. embassies abroad as leaders of high potential that will go on to lead their countries eventually, but we bring them over to the United States in their sort of mid-career journey to show them really what America is all about and sort of multidimensional, what makes this country great. And so over our 65 plus year history, we've had about 180 heads of state that have come through our program. So some notable folks like Margaret Thatcher and Indira Gandhi, Anwar Sadat, the current Secretary General of the UN is one of our alumni, former SG of NATO. So the list goes on, and the theory of the case, the why the American taxpayer pays for it, has been proven out time and time again. The other thing that we are, and we're known for, if you ask somebody in Washington, is we are a center for diplomacy, and it's multidimensional when we talk about diplomacy. It used to be, men in smoke-filled rooms talking about the future of foreign policy and kind of a sort of a closed loop in terms of how both our country and other countries think about how they show up on the international stage. Our theory at Meridian is that there's a whole new set of diplomatic actors out there, from artists and athletes to mayors and governors to entrepreneurs, corporate executives, nonprofit leaders, civil society. We all have a piece in this, and especially when governments are in flux, it's really incumbent upon all of us to take that forward for our countries and for ourselves. Beyond that, and I'll turn it over to Brandon momentarily, who leads our Center for Corporate Diplomacy. Just a little bit about me. I cut my teeth, started my career in finance very early on in the early 2000s. Was with Bank of America's private bank, with Putnam Investments in their fixed income shop, and then ended up in private equity at State Street being one of the largest custodial banks in the world, and then decided to take a little shift in my career and move over to the policy world and international space. And after leaving finance, I joined the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington. As the U.S. Chamber is the largest lobbying organization in the world, where I was the head of the U.S.-India Business Council, the largest bilateral trade association in the world, talking about trade between the U.S. and India. And then now I'm at Meridian, leading our external affairs and corporate affairs practice. And I sit on one of the advisory committees at GEC, or GEN as well. So that's a little bit about me, and then I'm going to invite my colleague, Brandon Solosky, our Senior Director for Corporate Diplomacy, to take the stage and help facilitate today's program. So thank you.
All right. Well, good late morning, good early afternoon. I hope everyone's doing all right today. My name is Brandon Solosky, Senior Director, leading the Center for Corporate Diplomacy at Meridian International, based in Washington, D.C. But I was just telling a couple of folks who I was able to meet in advance, it's very wonderful for me to be here in Indianapolis, to be in the Midwest. What a great place for an entrepreneurship conference. I just spent the week in Iowa, so I'm coming back from vacation. I grew up in the Midwest, so the neighboring state next door in Iowa. But just quite a bright spot, I think, that is not always talked about, not always necessarily on the map. It might be a newer city or region for folks who are visiting. But before we go ahead and get started, we do have an interactive session today. We're going to have some time for some Q&A. We've got a little bit of a exercise we're going to divide up into. But I'd love to get to know the audience just a little bit. If we could just get a quick show of hands. Are there any folks here coming from overseas? Anybody coming from the continent of Africa? And Asia? South America? Europe? All right, we've got some really great representation. How about any folks here from the region? All right, Indiana? All right, go Hoosiers. And then do we have any folks coming in from the coast as well? All right, so we've got a really great mixture of folks from the region, internationally. We've got all the continents represented. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today. And before we get into the topic of corporate diplomacy, I want to just give a little bit of my background about myself as well. Again, my name is Brandon Solosky, and I've been working in market entrance and the concept of corporate diplomacy for about 15 or so years. I was always someone who thought they were going to work in the State Department, and it was at the University of Michigan, where I used to teach international finance, where I really got involved in policy and business, and that confluence has always fascinated me. There's this great book, it's called The Secret Traveler, that really inspired me. It's about Coca-Cola. You can literally find a can of Coke in Tibet, Argentina, Antarctica. How does that happen? How do those types of relationships and those stakeholders get developed? How do those supply chains develop? I've just always been fascinated by how policy and government, relationships with different people drive business in the economy. It's more than just the business and the transactions. It's all that underneath that happens, which really defines corporate diplomacy for me in terms of stakeholder engagement and value. So really excited to be here with you to talk a little bit about this topic and to get into it a little bit today. But before we go ahead and get started, let me just give you a little bit of a concept, and my colleague Peru was talking a little bit about this. But when we think of diplomacy, I'm not sure what everyone here kind of thinks of. But my initial sort of reaction sometimes when someone says diplomacy, I think of the United Nations. I think of diplomats, as Peru mentioned, maybe sitting together in a room, maybe a little old school sometimes, just in terms of kind of the setup of that. But I think the notion of diplomacy nowadays has clearly evolved. We see individuals, from a Greta Thunberg to an Elon Musk, the rise of an individual, whether wealthy or not, or the influencer, and what they're able to do. It's much more than just diplomats or country to countries. I think back in the day we would have saw many decades, centuries ago, even going back to the medieval times, kings, king to king, we would have saw a lot of marriages and whatnot for alliances, but just quite an evolution from diplomacy where we see it much more now outside of governments. And I think what we're trying to demonstrate here and what we're talking about here is there's a role for cities and states. There's a subnational diplomacy element now. We have seen the influence of governors or mayors to be able to influence local economies, regional economies, state economies, and national economies. That's not something that you would have saw even just a decade ago. So that role of subnational diplomacy and that rise, I think, is really instrumental. If you look up here as well, the role of culture and sports, I think, is often overlooked, and something I think is really important to drill into when it comes to corporate diplomacy and when it comes to diplomacy as well. In the US, we're really entering into an era here of great sports diplomacy. We're just coming off of Paris 24, but we're going to have LA 28. We're going to have US, Mexico, and Canada for the World Cup. So we're going to have a trilat of a World Cup, which is fantastic. And to think of the number of international visitors here, the opportunity for the US as we enter our 250th anniversary, right? I believe there is was the parade happen or just happened? Coming back online, but I know that's coming up as well. Science and technology, the role and the rise of scientists, labor mobility, where science is able to flourish, attracting those folks. The future right now of new technologies when it comes to AI, when it comes to energy, when it comes to small modular nuclear reactors, and the push and the pull of where science is able to push corporate diplomacy right now is incredibly instrumental. In addition to that, obviously diplomats play an incredible role. But we could question, is Secretary Rubio obviously right now leading the State Department is incredibly influential, one of the more influential secretaries of state I think than we may have seen in some time. But they're not the only influencer when it comes to diplomacy. There are a lot of folks outside of just the foreign diplomatic corps that I was talking about that have a great influence on our traditional diplomats as well. The private sector, this is the one that we're really going to hone in and talk about today. The rise of the private sector and the role that the private sector plays in diplomacy is greater now than at any time we could ever have seen in our life. I'll talk a little bit about it later, but one of the things I often like to cite is the Edelman Trust Barometer Index. I don't know if anyone has ever heard of the Edelman Trust. I see a few head nods, but they do for a couple of decades now, they do a little bit of a trust barometer on major institutions, whether this be NGOs, media, corporates, government. Who's the most trusted institution? I'd be curious to see what some folks might think. I heard someone say business, and that's correct. When I was growing up, business by far and away was the least trusted institution. It would not be an institution you would look for moral guidance or to say anything about labor rights in China or to have an opinion on inclusion or anything else that's happening in society. And we see it's not okay now for a lot of businesses to sit on the sidelines. So a lot of people have an expectation for businesses to speak up. That is corporate diplomacy, navigating those types of tricky issues as you might offend some people. You might make some people really happy at the same time. This is a role that businesses increasingly find themselves in, especially as they are the most trusted institution. And I find that Edelman Trust Barometer Index really quite fascinating, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of really how diplomacy has really shifted and shaped over the years. And I've got a couple of questions I was going to sit down and talk with Peru about as well. I think one of the great connectors and leaders in DC when it comes to corporate diplomacy is truly my colleague. He's laughing, but I'm not just saying that as we work together, but he has worked in this space for 10 years has really helped build Meridian into what it is, and has seen some really great evolution of the private sector when it comes to these types of interactions. So before I move on, just going to take a couple minutes, and we're going to talk a little bit about the change that we've seen in corporate diplomacy in the private sector, especially over your time period. So Prue, just to kind of lead us off a little bit, I'd love if you could talk a little bit about the presence of the private sector in international affairs and how you've seen that really change over the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, well, I did a similar session at the GEC in Melbourne, and one of the first questions that came up was like, why should entrepreneurs care about corporate diplomacy? Why am I here? Ecosystem builders, venture capitalists, like, you know, we're not a major institution. We're not Coca-Cola. We're not Exxon. And I gave that question a lot of thought. I thought it was a really good question. And I think think about corporate diplomacy as the framework to manage and understand all of your stakeholders, whoever it might be, your customers, your regulators, your local government, your federal government, buyers, your potential acquirers. That's kind of the whole theory of the change. It's sometimes a misnomer to call it corporate diplomacy. Corporate diplomacy is really looking at how can you as pre-seed startup or a Series C or a established company or just a somebody who's pushing for a more robust ecosystem in your own country, how can you use these elements that we're going to present today to kind of strengthen your current standing, whatever that might be? And the beauty of this whole thing is that it really applies to whatever stage of enterprise you are in or whatever piece of the pie that you occupy. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. It's the ability to manage and understand your stakeholders. That's kind of the top line. The second one is, you know, if you don't manage and understand your stakeholders, another company will. And they're going to do it better than you. And they're going to figure out ways to access blended finance, to jump into a public-private partnership with the government. They're going to find a way to take advantage of some government-funded innovation hub that gives them the competitive edge over your enterprise. And so it's incumbent upon you as leaders, as CEOs, as startup founders. I think there may be a couple of folks from government also amongst us today to kind of understand what are the equities that matter to each one of those stakeholders. How can I deliver a win not only for myself, but to the person across the table from me? And it's evolving. There's no straight answer. If you Google corporate diplomacy, it'd be very interesting what kind of results come up in this space. The theory of economic diplomacy exists, the theory of commercial diplomacy exists. This is kind of taking both of those concepts and blending it into what we see like the 2020s are becoming. What are the 2020s becoming? I mean, we're seeing companies now like Amazon, like these huge global behemoth companies that have market caps that are larger than GDPs of some countries / most countries. Yeah. We're seeing people, I mean, I know you brought up his name, we'll do it again, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these kind of folks that capture attention, that grab headlines. You know, they're sitting at the table, Sam Altman's are sitting at the table with heads of state. They're out there sort of shaping the direction of foreign policy, and it's from a corporate diplomacy lens. And so that's why you should care for your own perspective, but also have an understanding of why this matters, how is this evolving. We're sitting in 2025. What will this look like in 2030? And I think it's only trending in one way, given what Brandon mentioned about the trust barometer. Governments are in disarray. There's a sort of a movement happening globally. It's certainly in this country, but also around the world. And the one of the things somebody told me once, they said, like politicians are in the business of getting reelected, but a CEO has to go to Wall Street every quarter and report out on earnings, and there's analysts on Wall Street that check those comments from that CEO, and you have to come correct when it comes to the guidance that you're providing for your company. And so who are you going to trust? The politician who's trying to get reelected in 2 years, or the CEO whose job's on the line because he has to give, or he or she has to give the right guidance to Wall Street to make sure their company stays afloat. So hope that answers your question a little bit.
For sure. I think to build on a little bit about what you were talking about as well, and I know we'll get into this a little bit later, but it's often the case too that we see the private sector really be the advisors to the government. Oftentimes they don't have the resources or those insights into some of those markets. So really kind of the rise of the private sector as a diplomatic actor and conduit as well for the government is something that I've seen a lot of that I know we'll dive a little bit into as well. To follow up, Peru, from your work at Meridian over your past 10 years and
Yes,
prior to that and beyond, what would you say is an underappreciated factor when companies operate in foreign sensitive markets?
I think I know it's not in vogue these days, but ESG, bringing up this old term, not old, well, a term that had more saliency perhaps a couple of years ago now than it does now. It's become a little politicized. The environmental, the societal, the governance aspects of a company. And corporate diplomacy provides that broader framework for looking at ESG issues, sort of multidimensionally. When a company enters a new jurisdiction, a new market, it gives you that sense of, I'm sitting across the table from a local official. What does a local official care about? What are they trying to understand from me? What am I trying to understand from them? How is this relationship beneficial to me in the long run, beneficial to them? I kind of chalk it down into how do you deliver wins for everybody around the table? And how do you first of all, understand what a win is for the person sitting across the table from you? Mm-hmm. And why is that person important? Perhaps they're not important to you today, yesterday, but they may be important to you tomorrow, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. How can you start building that groundwork, that understanding, that mutual understanding between you and that stakeholder? So that, I think, is one of the things that as a venture looks to expand beyond its borders, you really have to keep in mind there are different equities at play in any market that you're operating in. I'll give a quick example, right? The market in India, right? 1.3 billion people is a very different market to operate in than, let's say, China, than, say, Brazil, certainly the US. And what matters in, let's say, India? India, you have to think about most of the voters in India are either farmers or small business owners. Anything that threatens farming or small business owners, such as land acquisition. I want to build a factory.
Yep.
Building a factory is not linear in India. You have to it's a multi-year process of trying to get land, and then once you get the land, you got to source the talent, and then you have to make sure that the contracts that you sign have some sanctity to them, that people are actually going to abide by these contracts. And that all feeds up into your investors. And your investors are saying, all right, well, you said the factory is going to be online in 2 years. We're in year 4. What's the status? We're going to pull our investment. Well, maybe if you had thought a little bit more about what goes into land acquisition from the beginning and had built the inroads with those stakeholders, you may have had a better story to tell your investor. Understanding protectionism is also very important as you expand beyond your own borders. Different companies have different countries have ways of protecting, ring fencing their own local ecosystems, their own local environments, their producers, their job creators. Sometimes there's a perception of who are these foreigners coming to our country and why do they care about, do they actually care about us? Are they here to just sell to us? I hear this a lot in the Middle East. 2 weeks ago I was in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and Qatar. And the thing that kept coming up, I know it's also in the news. I was not doing advance for the president's trip, in case you're wondering. But the thing that kept coming up was people in the Middle East are sick of foreigners flying in, selling them something, and then leaving, right? They want people to come and invest and build and create jobs, create good knowledge economy jobs in their countries. And same thing's true for other economies in Latin America, right? They don't want to be just perceived as an extractive economy, right? You may be from Peru, from Chile. All right, great. You have lithium, you have copper, and like countries are really focused on how can we build deals to, guarantee critical minerals and supply chains. Great, but those countries want to build data centers. They want to have programming jobs. They want to be known for things that are not copper and lithium. How do you deliver a win to them? How do you deliver a win to that person across the table that's like, all right, I'm going to have to answer for what we've done. I may have given some mining contracts to a couple of these big players, but how did I really move the needle for my people? Did I build new networks? Did I build new industries? And so sometimes, again, it goes back to delivering a win for the person sitting across the table, and in turn, getting a win for yourself.
Yeah, that's definitely want to drill in a little bit on that one. That's what I really pick up as well. It's about understanding the needs, the issues, the pain points, the drives, the motivators of the stakeholders that you're dealing with. How can you deliver upon those needs while at the same time delivering value to your business, to your shareholders? And how can you have that 2-for-1? Those are going to advance both of your missions. You're going to have a more cooperative relationship. You're going to have a better business environment. It's going to lead to a more cohesive environment. So that's something that I really pick up on there as well when talking about those types of stakeholders, being able to deliver on the values and importance of those stakeholders. But when we're looking at this, Peru, and we've got a lot of folks from all over the world, all over the region, at a high level, why do you think entrepreneurs should really care about corporate diplomacy, and any tips or tools in terms of skill sets that you think they might ought to be thinking about?
Thank you. I went to graduate school at a place called Babson College. Babson, some of you may know Babson. It's regarded as one of the top entrepreneurship schools in the world. I didn't actually have any intention of becoming an entrepreneur myself. It's just not in my family's blood. I was very fascinated by the topic, just didn't have my own risk appetite for it. But what I learned at Babson kind of propelled me down the path I'm on now, which is the understanding of public policy, public administration for entrepreneurs. And that was like a missing, glaring hole of understanding in this Babson curricula of entrepreneurship, right? So they had organizational behavior for entrepreneurs, like cash flow analysis for entrepreneurs, like very cool stuff that was directly applicable to your startup at the stage your startup was in. Every student there had a business plan in their back pocket that they were trying to pursue, and the course load was like directly applicable to the different stages of entrepreneurship, but it didn't have any aspect of public policy or for stakeholder management. Certainly not corporate diplomacy. I don't think anybody, that term certainly didn't exist when I was in school. So why should they care? Because you're trying to do good for yourselves, for your stakeholders, for your family, for the communities you operate in, for the governments that regulate you. You want to obviously be lawful and legal in everything you do, and you also want to be looking around the corner. I think that's as a leader, it's sort of important for you to understand what direction of travel these items are headed, and to be able to see around the corner. In this kind of state of flux that we're in, people care about different things, and understanding what, like you said, the motivators, the things that not only you should care about, but you should understand about the person sitting across the table from you, are very important. I'm very excited to get into the case study and the rest of the slides. But before I do, I want to turn it around to you. Brandon doesn't do a good enough job of bragging on himself. I've told him this. He's helped a number of companies enter China, and has traveled to every province in China, speaks it fluently, speaks the language fluently. Sort of reflect a little bit on your time doing that, the companies that you helped bring in. I know this is not, it's not even on the script. Yeah. I'm just asking you, just freeballing here, like.
100%. So
a little bit of like what that looked like in the early 2000s, and obviously now what it looks like in the 2020s.
Yeah, no, it's funny. That's a great question, and kind of encapsulates sort of the full evolution of some of my work. I tell people I used to help companies go to China. Now I kind of help them navigate away a little bit. So that's a little bit of a full evolution in terms of the 20, 25 years I've been going back and forth to China, doing a lot of work. But I have seen some pretty remarkable things, and it's a really great question in terms of and it frames it in terms of how companies are sometimes the diplomatic actors. They're at the forefront. I think quite often, and I was saying this at the beginning, more often than not, a company might have more information, more data, more a deeper understanding, certainly maybe even a longer history sometimes than the relationships from government to government, or it's certainly deeper. The relationships between governments can ebb and flow, but the importance of a market to a business might be much more critical to that country. Since we are talking about China in this instance, it is an important consumer market for a company like Nike. It is less important for other countries, in terms of being a consumer, more of an exporter or a producer. So there are different ways in which countries and companies are looking at each other. But I have seen some really great examples with FedEx, for instance, one of our partners, where I was doing work with them, a really long, great history in China, and this was in Trump 1.0 administration. I happened to be over there at the time, and I was working on a project in Hangzhou, which is kind of the tech center of China, and FedEx was accused of having video cameras on their wings as they were flying over China. It was completely untrue. Fred Smith, the CEO, had to fly over, meet with the top levels of government, and negotiate and talk. Hey, we don't have cameras on our wings. There's no flying. This is rumor. Take us off the blacklist. That happened at the CEO level. That happened from Fred Smith, the founder of FedEx, going all the way over to China, his feet being on the ground, making that eye contact. That is really different than a diplomat from the State Department raising an issue and cabling over to the other side. Hey, we have an issue. FedEx is transporting this billions of dollars of goods every week. A very different result, I think, if you had just government sort of advocating on your behalf versus a company not only just talking directly to you, but also highlighting the benefits. At the same time, let's not forget, we're employing 25,000 people in your country and moving these goods. So kind of highlighting to those stakeholders. Again, thinking of it from the benefit of those stakeholders. What's important to who you're talking to from across the table? What's going to drive them? What's going to deliver impact? I think that's a little bit of a superpower as well. If you can sit down at any table and you're already thinking about what is advanced, in terms of what's their motivator, what's gonna, what do they want out of this conversation, you're probably a step ahead of whoever it is who is across the room from you. So learning to think like a diplomat, but doing so as a private sector leader, I think is that superpower that I kind of hope that you take away with a little bit from today or think about today. So that's kind of how I would answer that.
Well said. On the fly, this is not rehearsed. I just know he can answer that kind of thing off the cuff. Very quickly, and I forgot to do this in my opening remarks, but I will be remiss and kick myself if I don't do it. Meridian was a principal partner to the Obama White House on a variety of entrepreneurship activities. So all the Young Leaders programs, Young Leaders of the Americas, I see a hand, YLI, young transatlantic leaders, young Southeast Asian leaders. That was all Meridian. So we implemented all the Y programs for the Obama administration, and then for the first Trump administration, we implemented the WGDP program, which was the Women's Growth and Development Project. And this is just a quick way of saying we are strictly and studiously neutral, nonpartisan. Our funding comes from Congress, so we can't afford to play political games. So please don't construe anything that we say today as political. I know it's very hypersensitive these days and everything can be taken one way or the other, but for us, we are, the name, it's in the name, Meridian. We're right in the middle, omnipartisan. And the other thing to mention, you've heard us mention it a couple times now. I think it's just takes a second to explain it a little bit further. Meridian is, yes, supported by the federal government, but we also have about 97 corporate partners that work with us, that support us philanthropically, but we do work for. And what that looks like is we'll do weekly briefings. So we'll get 20 executives in a room for a briefing with a G20 ambassador to talk about economic diplomacy between their country and the United States. We'll invite a senior US government official to talk about trade policy, what's the sort of evolving nature of trade policy, not only for our country, but for other countries. How are our negotiations coming? So that's housed under our Center for Corporate Diplomacy, which Brandon leads, and I helped start 10 years ago at Meridian, our Meridian Corporate Council. The companies are kind of the usual suspects. We are thinking sort of multidimensionally of how to get SMEs and sort of non-traditional voices into that. But for now, building this, and I'm sure all of you can appreciate with fluctuations in government funding, having diverse sources of revenue was sort of the bullet point number one for us over the last 7 years. And so we've steadily built that up. Companies, we get to work with really the top levels, and this is not bragging, it's just a factual statement, with the C-suites of companies like Google and Meta and Exxon, Chevron, United, Delta, Visa, MasterCard, almost on a daily basis. And so a lot of these insights have been gleaned from that work. Of course, a lot of it is, we're not a think tank, we're not pumping out white papers, we're not giving policy recommendations, we're not involved in advocacy of any kind, but what we are is a master convener, and we convene that sort of iron triangle of corporate diplomacy, which is the private sector, US government, and foreign. In Washington, it's the Foreign Diplomatic Corps. Otherwise, outside of Washington, it's foreign leaders like yourselves. And so that's just giving a little bit of context that I forgot in my opening remarks. I'm going to give one more question to Brandon, and then I'm going to turn it over to him to lead us through the remainder of the slides, and then get to the case study here. So Brandon, in what ways, this is a straight up tee up question. This is like, it's made for TV. In what ways are multinational companies becoming de facto diplomatic actors, especially in frontier markets?
So I was...
frontier markets.
Emerging in frontier markets. So I was talking a little bit about that earlier. And let me give you a little bit of example about some of the work that we have at Meridian, how I think some of this is going on, actually. Just to answer your question really quickly, as I had mentioned before, there are certainly cases and instances I see all of the time where foreign commercial services, the State Department, the Department of Commerce don't have really great insights or presence. Companies do. I see this particularly in some of the more challenging frontier markets, especially around energy, where there are companies operating in markets that are really quite difficult, where government stability and investment are more challenging, and where it's even a little bit more difficult to talk about your presence in X or Y country sometimes. So that certainly comes up. And we have seen that with our private sector coming together with things that we have organized at Meridian through working groups, for instance. We have a relationship with the State Department's Office of Commercial Business Affairs where they really use Meridian and our corporate council. We work with 100 different companies as our kitchen cabinet of advisors. We have an issue related to energy. We have an issue related to health. We have an issue related to supply chains. You know, the companies are at the foresights. They know what's going on and are thinking and acting about this every day, and they can really provide those types of insights. So breaking down those types of barriers, and for me to see that kitchen cabinet of advisors of the private sector towards government, and doing so through a place like Meridian is something that is, really fantastic to see. And as Prue mentioned, we are so omnipartisan, bipartisan, that I think that is really truly one of our strengths. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that as well.
I was just going to quickly chime in if folks are interested in this, and we didn't even know this until it was highlighted by a member of Congress to us. There was a bill passed, I think in 2019, in the House of Representatives. It's called the Catalyzing American Business Through Diplomacy Act, CABDA, which kind of codifies and kind of puts this into law that government agencies need to be talking to one another. There needs to be more integration between the Department of Commerce and the U.S. Trade Representative and the White House and whoever it may be, whoever's in power, whether it's President Biden, Trump, whoever's next. All these government agencies need to be acting as in symphony, in sync with one another. And Meridian also plays a part in that, in bringing the private sector to engage with the government at those high levels, which is now codified in law.
Exactly. So let me just talk a little bit about some of the ways in which we are doing that at Meridian as well, particularly through the Center for Corporate Diplomacy. My colleague Prue has already talked about Meridian. We've been around for 65 years, founded by the State Department, really to be a center for diplomacy. And as we all know, diplomacy has really evolved and now includes the private sector, which is something I'm really excited about. And I've always been working at that edge of policy and business. So at the Center for Corporate Diplomacy, we really aim for three big things. And I have my cards here, and I'd love to spend some more time with all of you after this. But we really try to provide the insights, the tools, and the experience for all of our partners. We do throw through, your big companies that you would know about, but we also work with very small companies, at a very enterprise level as well. But we'll do things on a weekly basis, which will be like having the Senate Finance Committee come into our office on the staff majority of the Dems and the Republicans to have a conversation when it comes to what is important for Senate Finance when it comes to looking at the year ahead, when it comes to look at foreign affairs. We'll have a visiting foreign minister in who might be into town, whether that be from Turkey or from France. So these types of events are happening at Meridian on a weekly basis. They are open to the public. If you're ever in Washington, D.C., I definitely encourage you to come over and see us at Meridian. Our house is always welcome, and there's almost always something going on in terms of us being able to convene these types of events. So in addition to that, for our partners, being able to provide those on-the-ground insights is an important component as well. We lead delegations as well, multiple times a year. Peru has led multiple to Mexico City. We just were down for Feinbaum's inauguration, who just took the presidency in Mexico last fall. It was a huge year for elections. We're doing something very similar coming up in a couple of weeks to Turkey, this summer to Japan. So those types of insights and experiences are really important. And then I'm really passionate about having a little bit of a background in teaching. Our Center for Corporate Diplomacy, we have an open diplomacy, corporate diplomacy global leaders program where we provide training multiple times a year on various skill sets from negotiations to protocol to stakeholder management to a behind-the-scenes look at geopolitics or trades or to looking ahead at the UNGA a week and what's ahead or coming or different elections. So those types. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I saw a picture up there, and it kind of actually encapsulates something really perfect. I just want to spend a second on this. I think you'll appreciate this. Brandon and I are flying back to Washington on Thursday to present an award to Roger Goodell, who's the commissioner of the National Football League, the NFL. NFL is, most of you may know, one of the largest cultural exports our country has here in America. We have served as the international expansion advisors to the NFL over the last 4 years. So you may have noticed that the NFL is now playing games in London, in Germany, in Brazil, Spain. He and I know kind of what's on the slate for next year, which we've been sworn to secrecy on, for new countries that they're looking at. But even a huge multi-billion-dollar company like the NFL needed help navigating new markets, cultural norms. How does the game being played in Brazil affect the local ecosystem? How can we be good partners to our community in Brazil? Can we help set up flag football leagues? Is there something that we can do to help with coaching and youth sports development? And you would think, obviously it's the NFL, they have tons of money and they've got this figured out, but yet they turn to a partner like us to help navigate some of those new markets that they were entering into, which frankly, it's, I think, very cool and exciting. And
it is, especially as someone who's played fantasy football for 12 years, to hear your team is now on the clock. That's something I'm really familiar with. So to hear Roger Goodell's voice and then to see him on June 5th and a great example there of an individual, of a leading and taking charge. And, the NFL playing international games, that sounded kind of wild to me and a little out there when it first started happening. And now I love it. And now I look forward to those games. I know a lot of other people do because you get to watch football at like 9 a.m. And it's in a foreign market. It's a lot of fun. It's really expanded the games. I have friends in Kenya and Germany who text me about the games. The growth of American football and the power of culture. It's just a great example, I think, of sports culture and corporate diplomacy really coming together, where you see that soft power, where you see the growth. And I had no idea how ravenous Brazil was for football, or how big it was in Spain, Germany, and some of these other places. And exciting to see a really great example there of what I've got up there in terms of the rise of the influential CEO, which I already spent a little bit of time talking about. I don't want to beat the horse here on Bus, but a great example here on Roger Goodell that is a little bit different that Peru just mentioned. So when talking a little bit about corporate diplomacy, we had already mentioned some of the skill sets here about stakeholder management, and I've been speaking here in Peru, and I have been going for about 45 minutes here. I want to make sure we have some time for a little bit of an exercise as well. We've spoken quite a bit here about stakeholder management. Peru even mentioned land in India. So we've put together a little bit of an exercise here today for you all to think about this. So we're going to set that up. We're going to divide into groups of 3. So if I could do that, we've got a little bit of a case study, and I'll introduce this and walk you all through this as well. But we'll spend some of our time going through this case study as we go down to the bottom of the hour. I want to make sure that we have some time for that. But if we do happen to finish a little bit at the end and have some time, I want to make sure that we have some time for some questions. I want this to be interactive, and you'll see Prue and I around throughout the week, and I have my business cards. I really love to teach. I really love this topic, so anything that you need after this will be here for you as well. But let's go ahead and get started. I'd like for us to think about stakeholder management and negotiation, and to put us all a little bit into that mindset. So here, I put together a little bit of a case study, and we're going to divide into groups of 3. So let me go ahead and read this so that we're all on the same page. Then I've got some handouts to make this a little bit interactive as we divide into 3. But for this, we're going to pretend that we are a business, in this case, Solentry Energy. So we're a newer-ish startup. We've had some success, and now we're looking at some expansion internationally. Energy is huge. We're doing kind of all of the above. We're involved in wind. We're involved in solar and doing all sorts of stuff. And we've had a really great opportunity to have some expansion, and we're doing so internationally. And off of the coast of Tanzania, there is an amazing wind farm, and it's a beautiful coast, which could present some problems in terms of tourism and some of the other stakeholders that might be involved in the area. So we're going to think about what it would be like if we were to be representing and thinking about this from the perspective of Solentry. So we all work for Solentry Energy, and we have been assigned to think about this from the perspective of different stakeholders. So we're going to role play this a little bit, and I'll talk a little bit about who we have as our different stakeholders. But to do so, I've got a little bit of a map here to help us out. So I'll be handing this out. So why don't we, and we're going to be doing a little bit of an empathy map. Has anybody ever done this before? Anybody ever seen an empathy map or thought about this? Great. So a few people have, but it looks like this will be newer to most folks. So I think this will be a really useful exercise. As I mentioned, one of the things that I was hoping that you could really take away from this, or what I think of is a little bit of a superpower, is when I sit down at a table with someone to know that I'm dealing with different stakeholders and that they have different reasons to be motivated by something. Some of the tensions that they might have towards an issue. To know about that in advance and to already be thinking about that is really going to put you ahead of, I think, everyone else at that table, and really put you in the mindset of thinking like a diplomat. So for this particular case study, we've got an empathy map, and we have 6 different stakeholders that we're going to divide up into. The first one is a regional governor. So we will make this group over here the regional governor. So you'll be group number 1. I've got some sheets for you to think about and to fill out together. So we'll be completing this little empathy map. If you need some more space, it looks like they've got great flip charts and whatnot here, but you could probably just write down on this as you go about. So this group will be group 1, which will be the regional governor. So the regional governor we've got up here, and you can see there are some tensions. They publicly champion foreign investment as a tool for local development. They privately view environmental opposition as an obstacle delivering fast results before elections. I think these would be some typical things you might find if you were dealing with a regional government and you were trying to enter a market. So on your sheet up there, I've got written down as well what you're seeing up here, but just wanted to give everyone else in the audience a little bit of an overview. And we're going to be filling out that sheet from the perspective of what they think, what they feel, what they are doing, what we've been talking a little bit about. So for the next group as well, we have the National Energy Regulator. Why don't we, right here, be the National Energy Regulator? We'll have a little bit of a smaller group. So the National Energy Regulator is dealing with a whole host of different issues as well. They see great promise. There are some issues related to infrastructure, to local needs, to being able to do so with local labor. So a whole different bunch of concerns from the National Energy Regulator as well. The third, and we'll go ahead and get started here. We'll do this from the perspective of an environmental NGO director. So what would be some of, we're now talking with Solentry from the perspective of an environmental NGO. So you're going to be engaging with them. So what do you think might be some of the concerns, challenges when it comes to this group? Our next group is going to be a village leader. So we're going to be talking with a local village leader from the perspective of Solentry. So we're going to want to be thinking about what it is in terms of some of the challenges that they might have. And then our last two groups as well, just to round it out, we have our Ministry of Commerce and our trade official. So you will all be representing our Ministry of Commerce and trade official. If you want to join this group as well back here. And then we've got our last group up in the front here.
Oh, Brandon.
Yep.
Yeah, one group over there too.
All right.
One table.
So the last group here will be the East Africa Trade and Investment Offices. So this is a regional office. So what is going to be some of the things that we're thinking about from the perspective of the regional office? And what we were missing back here?
You skipped 2 tables back there.
Okay. All right. So, I'm missing that. We'll continue with the National Energy Regulator here, and then we'll do you all regional governor.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. All right. So, as we're looking at this in our groups, I want us to take some time within our small groups to think about this. So you have a little bit of an empathy map up there, but let me talk a little bit about what you're seeing in front of you as we dive in as well. So I would like each group to think about that empathy map as you're thinking about that from the perspective of a village leader in environmental NGO. So when it comes to thinking and feeling, what are the stakeholders' ambitions or fears or desired outcomes regarding Solentry's project? Thinking about this from a political or economic or environmental or social landscape. So I put down some tensions there, and I would like for you in your small groups here to start filling out a little bit about what you think this stakeholder might be thinking or feeling. And what is the end result? What are you all working towards here? Well, my colleague Peru Trevetti here is the CEO of Solentry. And he's a really busy guy. And he doesn't have too much time. So he needs the high-level bullets. This is why he has signed all of you out to represent Solentry. So he needs to know the top line, 3 to 5 things that are really important to know when it comes to your engagement with the village leader, when it comes to your engagement with the National Energy Regulator. So in about 15 or 20 minutes, I'd like you to be able to deliver to your CEO maybe some of the key takeaways that you think they ought to know about after you have thought through your stakeholder and their perspective. If the CEO is now going to be thinking about these different stakeholders, what do you think it is important for him to know about this? We see this all the time with a lot of our corporate partners. So we work with about 100 different corporate partners, corporate affairs, public affairs, government affairs, and they are delivering information to their CEO or to their C-suite all the time. I'm just thinking of an example. Right after Liberation Day with all of the tariffs, we had a salon dinner with the Japanese ambassador. We saw one of our companies really taking some diligent notes, and he was able to deliver that information directly to the CEO of their company and talk about that. This is what I was able to learn in this dinner. This is important to some of these stakeholders. And this is what we're trying to achieve in this exercise here. So when it comes to the National Energy Regulator or the governor, what are they thinking and feeling when it comes to Solentry's project? What are they seeing? This could be very different than maybe what they are saying. What someone says and what they do publicly or communicate might be a little bit different than some of their actions. So what are they doing versus maybe what they are saying? So we've got some different examples here. What kind of behaviors are signaling approval or hesitancy when it comes. What's that?
Do we get a raise if we?
Peru might definitely give you a raise if you knock it out of the park. Yes.
Sir?
Do we get a raise for?
Done.
So what someone says and what someone sees might be very different. What someone is hearing or doing might be very different. So let's think about, from your perspective, in this case, we're looking at the national energy regulators. So what do you think that they might be hearing when it comes to Solentry's market entrance? So if you're a national energy regulator, what do you think they might be hearing? So let's see if we can gather in some small groups, and let's spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes kind of in our small groups filling out this little empathy map, and then we're going to have a little bit of a delivery and discussion as well for Peru.
Did I give you? I was going to give 20. Why just 15?
So we'll go ahead and get started with some round robins in about 2 or 3 minutes. There's no right or wrong answers. If you want to give your stakeholder a little bit more background before you deliver the news of how it went with your stakeholder to our CEO, that's fine too. You having fun? Sorry, I'm still mic'd up.
Are you? Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you very much for saying that. That's very kind of you to say. Yeah. He's good. He's real good. He's good. Is it, excuse me, Malachi?
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm realizing we're headed down to the bottom of the hour, and I realize lunch is probably here headed soon. We've got some groups who have been who volunteered, already looking for promotions too. So let's go ahead and report to our CEO, but the very eager National Energy Regulator group. So this group from Solentry was assigned to meet with the National Energy Regulator. They are now coming back. They are going to deliver to the CEO some of the top lines of what the CEO ought to know about.
Well, can I just say something? This is like mildly obnoxious for me to be like put on the spot to be a CEO of anything. I will flip it around and give you my like Uber driver pitch. Like, if you like today's service, please give us a 5-star on the app. It means a lot to us. I hope you, especially Brandon's done an excellent job with this example. Very curious to get everybody's feedback and responses. And I just want to say, I know we're running short of time. Lunch is probably being served. We're going to be around a little bit afterwards if you want to catch up, hang out, talk a little bit. So don't feel like this is it. But sir, please.
So run through the 1 through 7.
Do you have a? Oh, yeah.
I think that might be your phone. I've fallen through this.
Oh yeah.
Hello, CEO. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well, very well. My team and I, we've done our due diligence and we've gone through this very intensely, and we're looking forward to that raise.
Thank you.
So number one, we're speaking with the National Energy Regulators. That's our team. That's what we do. Who are we empathizing with? The NER, the gatekeepers. They're working with very limited tech capacity. Number two, what do they need to do? They need to try to make this deal go through while complying with all national regulation. They need to protect the country's energy sovereignty, as well as long-term sustainability. And they need to vet the bid. Three, what do they see? They see an opportunity for long-term sustainability. They see an opportunity to maybe advance the energy sector within the country. Number four, what do they say? They support innovation and future growth. And how do we make this with limited land capacity? Number five, what do? They conduct technical and regulatory reviews. They engage with local and international advisors. They also potentially may delay approval just to do their proper due diligence. It could just be one of those factors. Number six, what do they hear? Political pressure from government ministries, and they've probably heard internationally energy deals gone wrong, and they don't want to fall into that bucket. Number seven, what do they think and feel? Pains, political backlash, fear of approval without proper due diligence, and then public scrutiny. But what do they have to gain? A hope for a better energy infrastructure and modernizing their energy sector as well. Raise.
Spot on.
Oh, okay.
Well done.
No, that's a really great example, or one
Excellent.
I like to think
Excellent.
about in terms of a big difference between what somebody says they're going to do versus what they actually do sometimes. They might say they totally support a project and then be leaking items to the press. So a big differentiator in terms of observed behavior versus the actual behavior. Really great job in terms of thinking through. I hope that was really helpful for you all in terms of kind of putting yourself in that mindset. Who would like to volunteer to go next? We just heard from the National Energy Regulator. Shall we hear from? We'll come back to the additions of the National Energy Regulator. The regional governor is a very fascinating one, and I was over here and we had an amazing discussion. So I would love to hear from this group.
Hello? Okay, so yeah, I guess in our discussion with the regional governor, we learned a few key interesting insights from our conversation. First was he's very focused on delivering fast results, so looking for quick wins around a number of key issues such as local development, jobs, and good media opportunities, and with the willingness to, and looking at anything that kind of serves as an obstacle to those as something that we need to navigate and try and address so that we can make sure that those aren't issues that prevent any progress.
Excellent. Any thoughts on the pains and gains section of that one?
Well, I think a lot of it appeared to be very politically motivated, so looking for ways in which he can look good in front of his constituents. And anything that would, one of the key insights in that whole conversation was not so much a focus necessarily on potential for environmental impact, potential on impacts to constituents. It was a lot more about the development and the economic benefits and the ways in which he can kind of promote himself as part of that package.
Excellent. I thought one really good point. Excellent. That this table brought up was the public scrutiny aspect of it. And when you're in elected office, how much you're trying to minimize the downside risk of any scrutiny from your decisions.
I think another one as well that was in there that's interesting that we see a lot as well was the difference between a regional versus the national, right? So sometimes there could also be tensions, and we see that here in the U.S., right? All of the time. So I think that's another thing to be a little bit observant about as well, that I know that could be a part of the regional governor. All right, let's turn to one that's a little different, a little bit of a different stakeholder. I'd love to hear from this group right here. Yes.
So for our group, our first approach is to engage the community leaders.
All right.
So over time, you find out that when such projects come in, it's just done at the high level. So maybe the federal government, the state government, and then the local government and the chiefs are not included or involved in such discussions. So the thing is, the local chiefs are actually the people on ground. They know the points, they know the issues. And as we're discussing, you see the local chief is sort of in the middle. He has the people or the families who he's in charge of, and he has the government who he's responsible to or he's responsive to. So the local people know what the problems are. The villagers will tell them, okay, this project sounds good, but we need reassurances. The federal government can't give those kind of assurances. The state government can't give those assurances. But when you engage the local leaders, so it's not just a local leader by himself, but he has a council of leaders. So through those people, if you are able as Solentry to convince them, you find out that they'll be a mouthpiece. They'll champion your cause. They'll be able to say, okay, you know what? This project will be good for us. And if you're asked, what's in it for us? All these things you're saying are long term, right? So what's in it for us short term? You can say as Solentry, so one thing we put out is that you should be proactive. So if you're taking away their source of livelihood, most of them are fishermen, right? What are you giving them in return? Now, we know that with climate change and the way things are going, global fishing or fishing in the open will not be the same. You will not still get the same amount of catch as you will now in like maybe 50 years, 100 years. So why don't you train them on modern fish farming? And say, okay, guys, why don't you come in? Well, before we even do any groundbreaking ceremony, we're going to train you guys on cat or fish farming. We're going to teach you how to process your fish to earn more money. So those are some of the engagements you can do with the local leaders and the people. So by the time they see these things, they begin to see, okay, these people are genuine. These people want to help us do some things and improve our livelihoods. Now, one con we talked about was land allocation. We're going to lose our land, but what are we getting in return? So as I said, by the time you engage them properly, you see that by the time you say, okay, we need to, even if you compensate us, we have something that will help us keep us going. Now, you understand their pain points. What do they really need? Sometimes you're talking about wind turbines, but these people probably need a hospital in their community. So what do you do about that? How do you convince them? So as Solentry, you should be able to say, okay, from our engagement with the major stakeholders in the village. Now, the government is a stakeholder, but you see that the people who are on ground, who will be most beneficial or who will be most receptive or hostile to the project are the people in this community. So how do you engage them? And then another thing is, so you talked about schools or hospitals. Who manages them? That's where the issue of PPP comes in, public-private partnerships. So, okay, as Solentry, we can build clinics. When we build them, we can hand them over to the government. The government provides doctors, provides nurses. We can even have an agreement that for the next 3 years, we will manage and, let's say, fund these hospitals with drugs and everything necessary. And for the pros, obviously, the energy generation. The people need power. They need clean energy. So by focusing on these things, they get the energy. Obviously, jobs will be created, skilled and unskilled jobs. So even as you engage with the stakeholders, the villagers, you tell them that, look, even if you didn't go to school, we have jobs for you. You can be an auto mechanic, you can be an electrician, a welder, and there's something for you. And then infrastructural investment. So these are some of the issues we discussed in our group.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Mr. Ambassador, well done. You're going straight to the top.
Yeah.
That was
I'd like to
really,
mention
really
that
well done.
We're both from Nigeria,
Please.
so we really understand
Yeah.
this because a lot of investors do come to Nigeria, and we know the pain points of the people, and that is what you need to know first before you even invest in that particular community. So it's a lucky group for them.
So well said. Thank you.
I think that's a really great example too, where you think of spheres of influence and power. You think of national level, right? The most obvious and biggest power, of course. But here's a really great example too, where village leader, this will be easier to take care of. Look at the influence and the power and the amplification effect that they have on the regional, on the national, on the local community, and the importance of getting that buy-in as well. So not always kind of the most obvious of power players align up. So this is a really great example, a really well job done in terms of the 6 stakeholders that we're dealing with and looking at. All right, we've got just a couple of minutes to wrap up as well. So why don't we go over here to the East Africa Trade and Investment Office, who we just engaged with. The spokesperson just left. Looks like we have a new spokesperson. Yeah.
So, who are we empathizing with? So, who do we need to know and empathize with? We need to empathize with the government, understand their structure. I'm winging it because coming in behind that, I'm like, whew, okay. So
You're doing great.
basically, understanding the government, which is huge because they make the decisions. So you have to know their laws and understand their needs and wants, and to be able to fulfill them, as well as understand the risks that are involved. What do they need to do? Fully understand, again, the needs. So yeah, he left. So really understand the needs of the area where we're trying to venture into, and not making it all about self, but exactly what does the country in that area specifically need? What do they see? They see opportunity for growth and opportunity to help enhance the lives of those that are in that community. What do they say? How will the environment remain safe? If we come in with all of our equipment and all of our equipment and all the stuff that's involved, sometimes that bring hazardous to the community, and they want to protect their land as well. So they want to make sure there's no chemical hazards that are being involved. And what do? They are very protective of their limited resources. So we have to understand that, so we can have the like-minded as they have a strong sense of protecting their land, their resources. What do they do? No. What do they hear? They hear that issues matter first, and that we are all about bringing forth the solution to better the community, and what do they think and feel. Their pain points, again, this is a high risk that they're getting involved in, so they have a lot of concerns and questions that still needs to be answered. And the gains is expanding on their limited resources.
Great.
Excellent.
I really think that the East Africa Trade and Investment Office is a great example of a tool that could be an amplifier. If this goes well, hey, we can bring this to other regions. If we can get them on board, we're starting to get support for other regions. So a little bit of a big contrast to that hyper-local village aspect. All right, we are at the bottom of the hour, but I want this last group to just go. If we could do a quick high-level minute to our CEO.
Yeah, you got two groups. Yeah.
Just to round us out. I think we might be a little divided. We had another regional governor, so I think we've got to all 6 stakeholders, except for our last here. And our environmental NGO director is a little challenging, yes? Yes. All right. We'll finish this up, and I want folks to get lunch, but before we do that as well, we'll just finish this.
Yeah.
All right. Hello, my name is Devin Rhodes, and our group is going to select a local representative to communicate to Cilantri a message from the local Tanzania community and their input of professional voices in order to create a positive change. We're going to emphasize 2 parts. We want to make sure that we have the communication of financial tax deduction opportunity for this project to make sure there is follow through for sustainability of this project, but also something that can be visually seen, something that makes the faces of the land and the people brighter. And with that said, we want to make sure that the message is communicated to the Chief Communications Officer first before we go ahead and get the NGO director and the CEO together in order to have a high quality message sent. Thank you.
Smart. I like that. Excellent.
All right.
I think we have time to get to that table.
Yeah, let's if you did a couple of burning desires, if we could just, I know we hit at some of what you were talking as well, but if there's anything else you'd love to fill in, I'd like to have everyone give a shot.
Okay, thank you. We will be quick. So we represent Cilantri. Is that? Uh-oh. Okay, here I am. So we represent the company, and so quickly for number 1, we just really want to empathize with the Minister of Commerce and Trade and also with the local stakeholders, really understanding what their needs are so that we can come prepared with a proposal package in advance that addresses and identifies what their gaps and their needs are. In addition to that, we also want to be, for number 2, what do they need to do? They need to manage their procurement process. They also need to look into incentives to incentivize companies like us. We also need to, again, understand what does the ministry desire to be successful? What does success look like for them versus just what we are coming in to do. And then we also need to they need to ensure that they establish what their infrastructure needs are. In addition to that, for number 3, what do they see? They see the Chinese offer, they see investment in neighboring countries, and then they also see their voters. Obviously, they want to stay in office. In addition to that, for number 4, what do they say? Continue negotiation for incentives and infrastructure needs. They also want to know what we bring to the table, what's going to empower their communities, and then they also need to ensure that we stay aligned with their geopolitical and procurement policy. Number 5, what do? They are looking into incentives, site location, and then regulations as well. Finally, rounding it out, what do they hear? They hear concerns from their voters and their constituents. And 7, gains, keeping jobs, not losing their elections, hiring locally, the best still possible, leveraging the Chinese counteroffer. And then a pain is fear of poor project implementation that doesn't realize the intended goal.
Well done. So good. The best for last. That was really excellent. Thank you.
Well, we're now breaking for lunch, but I really hope this exercise was useful. One of the big takeaways I was hoping for all of you was really that superpower of being able to think like a diplomat and really to be thinking through an empathy map like that in a very quick way, and to do so more often when it comes to meeting with various stakeholders that you are meeting with. You're going to find yourself in a really great position, at a very advantageous position to be able to be doing these types of things. But also, again, my name is Brandon Slosky, my colleague Prue Trivedi. Please come see us in DC. We are at Meridian International Center, just about a mile up from the White House. So we'd love to see you over in DC at Meridian. We have corporate diplomacy and events going on like this all of the time, and I wish you all the best of luck with the remaining days that we have here at this conference and to be here together in Indianapolis. Thank you so much.
Well done, Brandon.